Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Most will recognize the music in the background as being from Carmina Burana, Karl Orff, the most notable composer of Nazi Germany. A little known fact that I think many people would like to forget. Okay, welcome back. We're going to do a little bit of a different one today. Couple of themes, one short one and then a longer one related to the art behind you. And well, I think you can already see the artwork. Once in a while it decides to put writing in, and sins of the moon goddess, the goddess. It's interesting how the AI plays with words. I'm not sure if it's trying to make you think that it doesn't know how to write sentences, or that it has no intelligence in what it does, but I think there's something there. So I'll tell you what this is going to be about, but then we're going to sidetrack for a little bit to something else I found today that I wanted to share with you. I'm going to call this segment, The Evolution of Sin, from Moon Goddess to Goon Squads. But before we get into that, I wanted to share with you something I discovered that I thought was pretty interesting. So bear with me. Okay. Let me move over here now so you can see my browser. One of the musicals that my son and I are quite fond of watching some of the songs from, his favorite way to start the morning is with the Good Morning song from Singing in the Rain. And he likes the Make 'em Laugh song a lot. But today we happen to listen to one we don't listen to so often, this one called Moses Supposes His Toeses Are Roses. And weird song. When you look at the movie, you don't really, it's kind of like, well, okay, it's another song and dance number, another comic song and dance number, but it really doesn't serve the story in any way. And you wonder why knowing how Hollywood is and how they're interested to cut down everything so that they have the smallest production possible that fits about the right size of a movie. You would think if there was a number that wasn't real catchy or real useful to the story, they might consider cutting it. And so I got to wondering, well, where does this Moses Supposes His Toeses Are Roses song came from? Well, what does it mean? Now, most people would say, oh, it's just a tongue twister. It's just a nonsense song. Well, I'm going to give you a proposition on this that will maybe make you question that idea. Okay, so if we look at the history of this, you will see that the oldest published version is found in 1888. Well, the movie was not made, obviously, until, let's see, about 1952. And there were versions between then, but nobody really knows where it came from. In this earliest version, it was described as causing much distress of mind to the Hapitu of Minnetonka, which I believe is, it's a town in Minnesota. Maybe because that was where certain people had settled. I had to look at that. Let's see what Minnetonka's settlement history looks like. I'm guessing it might have been a German settlement. Minnetonka means water tank. Big water. Okay, I don't see any big water near there. That's the Native American name. Who settled there? Let's see. First census lists 41 households, but it doesn't really say where they're from. Interesting. Huh. Well, I'm guessing that maybe the settlers were possibly German, or maybe, let's see, around that time when we settled, the late 1880s, could have been, oh wait a minute, 1822, exploration, 1851, the Dakota Sioux sold the area to the United States, so it wouldn't have been settleable until then. The first census in 1857 was 41 households, and 29 of them are listed as farmers. Interesting, there's no comment here about demographics, so we can't really tell anything from there. Oh, here we go. Well, that's just the latest census. Let's see if there's any clear trends there. Racial makeup, 90% white. Okay, so that really doesn't tell us much in terms of their ethnic background. Anyway, if anybody happens to know anybody from Minnetonka, maybe you can ask where the most of the settlers came from. What, various places in that area were popular places for settling of different European nationalities, depending on who was migrating the most. And there are German enclaves, there are Dutch enclaves, enclaves of strong Jewish background, Catholic background, or Protestant, and so forth. At any rate, Moses supposes his toes are roses. Does it make any sense? Well, one of the things that struck me is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is a concept in physics called a toe, a theory of everything. And this is a very, basically has been the holy grail of physics for roughly the last 100 years. And it struck me, Moses obviously is, the Jewish big hero of the Jewish story, their first Messiah, if you will, the one who took them out of Egypt, supposedly. And it's also a very common name for Jews in the rabbinical faith of Judaism. It's basically like naming your kid Jesus if you're Roman Catholic. Certain countries prefer that, other countries don't. In Spanish countries, Jesus is a very common name. It's not common in other countries that are Christian. But so there's probably some groups of Jews that like to use the name Moses, and there's others that maybe don't. Anyway, Moses kind of conveys the idea of a spiritual leader, a lawgiver, somebody who's got a lot of knowledge, right? Moses supposes his toeses, his theories of everything, are roses. Now, what does roses bring to mind? Well, it brings to mind the Red Cross, the Rosicrucians, who have basically, they're one of these secret organizations that has a certain idea of truth, of sort of esoteric, occult truth, in fact. The rose has been a very strong symbol in, for instance, the War of the Roses in England, which was a major event in the formation of the England we know today in the English language. So Moses supposes his toes are roses, sort of says to me that Moses supposes erroneously, for nobody's toes are roses or posies, as Moses supposes his toes to be. That's the original version, and then the version in the song is slightly different, but it's kind of similar. Now, this little ditty, I think, is pretty interesting because, you know, look, okay, so does it relate to this idea of the theory of everything? If we look up the theory of everything, this is kind of an interesting note here. It says that the term was first used in 1977 by physicist Harold Fritsch in his lectures in Vienna, and then maybe occurred in an article as the acronym TOE in 1986. So if there's any relation here, this verse was kind of making fun of people basing theories of everything on sort of the Rosicrucian idea, which is also based on, it's one of the things that's based on the tradition of the Templars and the Hermetic tradition, which, you know, if you know anything about that Hermetic knowledge, there's a lot of people into that idea of, okay, alchemy and esotericism, occultism, and you know, there's basically two forms of that, two ways of viewing the Red Cross. One is as a symbol of love, of the heart, love magic, if you will, tantric magic, which is the basis for a lot of love cults throughout history. Or you could view it as a symbol of blood, and blood and the sacrifice of the letting of blood is basically the source of occult magic. So I think, to me, this tells something deeper, something that maybe was being foreshadowed when this verse was made up, that was maybe telling somebody down the road that they were barking up the wrong tree in terms of what they were going after, in terms of spiritual magic, spiritual power, etc. Okay, so that's a little aside. Let's get back to our main topic here. Sin is an interesting concept. Where did that word come from? Where did that idea come from? Let's look at this picture again. And so this is basically what the AI art drew, or one of the pictures I got when I gave it the prompt. Hang on here. Sins of the Moon Goddess. And it was interesting that you really get an idea of how strongly opinionated our AIs are when they give very little variation in what they spit back. So let's just take a look here at, I think I've got the whole, here's all four images that it gave me. And you can see that they all basically show a female figure. The idea of a goddess, they all basically show kind of an anime kind of a character. Nondescript sort of Asian something character. One shows three of them, like the moon, the goddess has two assistants or something, one male, one female. I thought that was interesting. And very differently plays up on the idea of the horns, which is common in moon cults, but it's also a feature of sun cults because when you have different kinds of eclipses, either the moon or the phases of the moon will have horns, but during eclipses, either the moon or the sun has horns, depending on what kind of eclipse it is. The solar eclipse, the sun emerging or going into the eclipse looks like crescent. And so there are gods that have horns, horny gods, and there are horny goddesses. And this is something that's confusing to people, because who's the horny one? Well, we think of Lucifer, Satan, the devil. But in fact, female horny ones are just as common. And in fact, the moon goddess is almost always dual in nature, basically a shapeshifter, male and female. And the goddess of, or god of sin, i.e. the embodiment of succubi and incubi, which are basically, if you look at the literature, those are two ways of describing the same kind of shape-shifting creature that tempts us to sin, which is a more common way to lose your soul than calling up the devil and selling your soul for success. Although that's the model we talk a lot about, it's much more common to start sliding into sin through indulging in our narcissistic passions, our lower passions. Okay, so where does this word sin come from? Well, the etymology would seem to indicate that, it's just an Old English word. But in fact, sin was a goddess, the moon goddess in Akkadian mythology. If you know the history of Sumeria, one of the first dynasties was the Akkad dynasty of Sargon, and later on known as Nana or Inanna, which might be short for Sinanna. In fact, sometimes this goddess was given the name Nana Sin. Or let's see. Now, interestingly enough, this particular goddess was the main cult center was Ur, which, if you know anything about Ur, you'll know it's in the southern part of Mesopotamia, near the Persian Gulf. And this is an area that would have been most affected by lowering and raising sea levels. And it would have been one of the main sea routes for, suppose there was a major cataclysm around the Upper Dryas. If that area was flooded, it would have been, because the sea levels were that high, that would have left a lot of devastation. Anybody who was around after the sea level receded, after the cataclysm, would know, man, when the sea levels go down, this is going to be a very fertile area, because there were a whole bunch of cities here. It's a great place to be. And you would guess that there would be kind of a rush back to the areas that had been previously the most fertile, the most prosperous. And we see that from both directions. It's less visible and it's less talked about from this direction. But if we look at, this is a good map of, in fact, Shinar or Sinnar, which means Sinar is where we get the word Sumer from. Sinar, Sumer, a variation on it. And actually, the Greeks called it Singara. And it's interesting that this city of this dynasty of Sargon, was supposedly not domestic. It was some ruler that came from overseas. Well, you can see is right down here near the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. And lo and behold, if you think about where Singara or Sinjar might have originated from, it all sounds a lot like a place that we're fairly familiar with today, Singapore, which used to be called, let's see, Sinjar, I think at one point. And, well, let's see, do we have the etymology? Comes from the Sanskrit word for lion city, which lion iconography was one of the main motifs of ancient mythology in the Middle East, right? The other being more northerly, being more of a bull iconography from the Assyrian part of the area, which might signify the Western thing. Now, interestingly enough, let's see, where did I find this there? Okay, also in many usages today, Sino means Chinese. And in fact, if we look at the original Aramaic word, Xin is also associated with Chinese. So there were contacts with that Far East area, and maybe the meeting point was around Malaysia, Singapore. The tip of that peninsula was where, you know, basically East met West. Trying to find where it said the association with also interesting is how this the Hebrew shin or sin is drawn, and this is an Aramaic character which turned into the S in other languages, but actually looks a lot more like an omega, like it would have been maybe the last letter of an alphabet. Makes one wonder if you know about numerology and so forth. In fact, sin is 600 plus whatever. I have to see what that does in the gematria calendar. Oh, here's another one. Shin also stands for the word Shaddai, which they say is a name for God, but if you've listened to my content before, Shaddai does not mean God. El Shaddai was a different God, one of the other Elohim, and I went into that before. It's apparently associated with the mountain of the triple goddess, which is associated with this moon goddess Sin, and her representation as Inanna, who was also one of these triple goddess forms. Inanna was the mother goddess, and there was another goddess that was the young one, and another one that was the old one. And together, they represented the female domineering god, the female power that basically other places in Sumerian mythology you see as the Lilitu, the dark feminine spirits that hated humanity. They were always causing trouble, causing barrenness in the womb, causing miscarriages, causing pain in childbirth, creating discord in families. And the idea was that, oh, okay, this dark female entity is kind of a demon that you have to appease. So, yeah, this whole sin thing looks like it's connected with a lot of the stuff I talk about being the adversary, the bad guys. And that is basically, linguistically, the origin of sin, and then there's a very strong connection between that and the legendary founding of Shinar, especially the city of Ur and the people that came from the sea and sort of took over the area, being from somewhere else. And I'm thinking that they came from China, and that was where the center of moon worship, of this dark entity worship was, and maybe is today. And if you listen to my content, you will tie that together with the idea that there were two phases of humanity's creation. One was as a slave species that was basically built to serve the gods, those gods being sort of selfish, dark entities that used mind control to keep these slaves in line, and they would basically communicate with them telepathically. They didn't need language then. They didn't actually want the slaves to have language, because then they would be talking to each other instead of just taking orders from the shining ones, the Elohim. The second phase of human development was this first phase was centered around the Southeast Asia area of the old continent of Lemuria. And that would have been definitely within the sphere of what became China. Basically, Asia was connected with most of Indonesia, the Philippines, and possibly even Australia in that early time. And so it would have been very easy for a civilization in that era to encompass that whole area and kind of spread from there. And that, in fact, is what many people believe, and is why right today, in fact, I just talked with somebody about it, if you remember recently, there was in the news a story about this possible pyramid/temple complex at Gunung Padang, which is only about less than 100 kilometers away from me here. And very, very good study was done with limited resources and limited time by an Indonesian archaeologist. His work was published and popularized by Graham Hancock, and almost immediately was attacked viciously, I mean with a capital V, by the establishment archaeology cabal, if you will, who had not visited the site, who had not done anything but looked at cursorily the paper and suddenly made these pronouncements that this was all nonsense. No, these rocks are all natural, or it's all recent, blah, 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 and completely discounting what this archaeologist had found, which was that there were many layers of construction here of shaped blocks of stone that looked much like the stones that were used in later temples in the area. And if you know Java, there are many, many temples here. All over the island, many of them abandoned for a long time since the Muslims have been predominant on this island for the past 600 or 700 years anyway. So all the old Buddhist and Hindu temples have fallen into disrepair, except for the ones on Bali, which is the one part of Indonesia that's still majority Hindu, I think, or Buddhist, maybe a mixture. At any rate, this temple complex, he did some cores. He couldn't afford to do excavation, except for on a very limited basis. But what he discovered doing coring was that there were multiple layers of construction there. There appeared to be, basically cycles of destruction and then reconstruction. And in one of the layers, he found organic material that was dated to 24,000 years BC, which would have been, if this was a pyramid, and the shape certainly indicated it was pyramid shaped, that it would have been possibly the oldest pyramid on the earth. And of course that was absolutely anathema to everybody. But interestingly, even there have been people finding pyramids everywhere. Other parts of Europe, in China, and certainly there's a bunch of pyramids in the Americas. But for some reason, this one discovered in Indonesia was like, oh, we gotta attack them. We've got to destroy them. We've got to take all of their literature out of the thing. We've got to make them look like complete jerks. And this is way beyond the pale. This is far more than anybody's done to the folks that found, there's basically the Balkans pyramid. There are pyramids in China that, folks are doing research on, and nobody is calling foul on any of that, even though they're talking about similar dating. So what's going on with this one? And I think it really ties into this whole idea of sin. And sin coming from the east. And still coming from the east. Because it is my contention that what is going on in the Middle East and around the world is basically a setup. A setup by the agents of sin. And these are, of course, agents of the adversary. And the adversary has always tried to destroy chosen species by spreading division and sin and different definitions of sin. Okay, so this battle we have right now over what is sinful sex, for instance. Is homosexuality okay? Is cross-dressing okay? Is non-vaginal sex okay? All of these things that we've had to deal with in 100 years are old questions, and they have divided people before. And if you look at the vast march of culture, you basically will see shifting between going very far in the sinful side and very far in the anti-sinful side. And this basically coincides with a shifting from worshiping the moon goddess or the moon gods and goddesses to the sun god. And in almost no culture is the sun viewed as anything but a male entity, interestingly enough. And so you've got this shifting sands between a virtuous male entity, maybe with a patriarchal approach to sex, if you will, and the sinful moon entity, the goddess of the night, the dark one. And this pervades our culture, not just here but worldwide, and it all seems to lead back to Asia, the same places that I think are behind what's going on today. The top forces are not necessarily the ones they're telling you they are. The folks in the intelligentsia in Europe are basically tools of, and if you look back at the origins of this, kind of the woke cult, the communist globalist elite, the Marxists, and the fascists in Europe, you will note that they all have roots in folks bringing back supposedly arcane knowledge from the East, from Tibet, from China, from India, and also from within the more rebellious elements, let's call it that, of Islam. Many people don't really know much about the history of Islam, but it's had many stages it went through, and a number of folks that thought they were the next prophet. The original idea of Islam was not that Muhammad was the final prophet, that Muhammad was just another in a series of prophets that went all the way back through the Bible. And they considered Jesus, Isa, as just another prophet. And there have been many characters since who have portrayed themselves as the next prophet, either with an agenda that's more like free love, let's all get high and dance and have sex. That's kind of in the Islamic tradition. That's essentially the Sufi influence, and this is very popular today. Sufism is making a comeback, and it's now the sort of the New Age version, the New Age attractor for Islam is Sufism. That says, basically the Sufis were not such great guys. They started out as a cult of assassins, the Hashashin, who basically used drugs and to get into this state of divine madness, and would go assassinate other, competing leaders. Now there were others who would just, do their drugs and dance around in ecstasy, praising the one, and this is also kind of the Islamic notion where their version of this cosmic oneness. Everything is love, everything is one, non-dualism, which is a very Eastern thing. Okay, if you want to pick one thing that is different between Western culture and Eastern culture, it is the emphasis on non-dualism in Eastern culture and the emphasis on dualism in Western culture, that yes, there is good and there is evil. And if we want to keep a healthy civilization, we have to keep evil out. We have to keep it down. We have to have laws and enforce those laws evenly across all society. And that's fundamentally the essence of Western government, is that it should be a government for all. It should be not authoritarian, although it has been, obviously, when we had kings and stuff like that. But if you look at the history of kingship in England, for instance, as opposed to China or India or even, Central Asia, Russia, the Mongol Empire, the kingship of the Germanic peoples was much more equitable. In fact, in many cases, in the oldest traditions, the king was elected from all the tribes at a gathering called the Thing, where also everybody got to bring their grievances and work them out according to the tribal law, which applied to all tribes. So there was a much more even distribution of power in that culture than in the rest of the world. They don't tell you about that anymore. They tell you, oh, Europeans were slavers and blah, blah, blah. This is bullshit. Slavery was much more common in the East and lasted longer. In fact, slavery is still going on in China. There are people who are slaves. They have no freedom. They're bought and sold like cattle. They're bought and sold for their organs. That's why they've been tracking DNA. All of the DNA companies got bought up by China, and they are gathering all that information so they can know where to gather the organs they need for the hyper elite. These are the sinful ones here. They are the ones behind the World Economic Forum, in my opinion. The globalist cabal are mostly lower level functionaries of much more powerful figures like Vladimir Putin, like Xi Jinping, other very, very rich, old, connected families that are probably tracking bloodlines back to the goddess of sin, the Lilithian bloodlines. And if you've heard me talking about the different characters, so for about the last 4.5+ billion years, we've been playing a version of this game of creation where God had to basically bow out to everybody else. Let me get to some visuals so I can review this for those of you who haven't been following my channel. So the progress of creation in a simulation multiverse is basically kind of like Microsoft develops Windows. Okay, you develop one version, you actually have two development teams. One works on this one version and the other works on the next. And if you know anything about Windows, you know that the odd versions are always better than even versions, because the odd version team has better leadership and better engineers. It's the A team of Microsoft. So Windows 11 is a good version. 10 was shit. 9 was okay. 8 was shit. 7 was okay. 6 was shit. And so forth. I don't know if they're going to come up with another version if they change their development model, but this is a common way of doing things. And it applies when you're designing basically any complex product these days. You first do a simulation in a more controlled environment. That's very white box. In other words, you can see what's going on, and it's sort of done by the developers and maybe a few testers that work very closely with the developers. That is sorted out by simulation until it converges on the solution you want. And then you do another test, basically that's outside of that design team, that is run by people that don't know the design very, very well and are just poking at it. in any which way they can think of. It's a more user-centric test. Okay, so this is kind of the model that creation works on. It's a very scientific model. It's what you would do if you were God and you were a scientist, a great engineer, a great scientist. And how else would you do creation? Okay? You don't create incredible things just by getting on Instagram or TikTok and doing what everybody else does. That's not a creator. I'm sorry, folks, that think you're being creative. You're doing Me Too shit. This is adversarial stuff. It's not necessarily evil, but Me Too characters end up being stock characters in the NPC board library. Okay? They just are not useful to creation. They're not necessary. They're nice window dressing, maybe, but the important characters are these other ones that are doing the heavy lifting. And you need to have an adversary to push. This is like the external tester that it just wants to make the brain break. That's what final testing is when you're doing when you're making products like a smartphone or a web application or something like that. Okay, so this is like the external testers that are poking it so hard, trying to make you fail before the customer gets its hands on the product. Lucifer is more of the internal tester. He understands what the plan is. Kind of wants it to fail, but at least up to the point where God was not running what was going on in the highest heaven, Lucifer and God were pretty much in sync. What happened at the end of that, and this is what the real original sin is, perhaps, was that God did not participate in the game with a clean slate. In other words, with reincarnation amnesia. So up to a certain point, every version of creation, God knew the plan and then was actively playing, knowing what the plan was. So he always had, an ace up his sleeve or something like that, and a home field advantage. And that eventually got every other player mad, because God was not almighty. God did not want to be almighty. The whole point of the game was to make other characters that were peers of God, friends, family. God doesn't want to be almighty, micromanaging tyrant. No healthy soul would want that. That is a dark, warped megalomaniac, a Hitler, a Stalin. One of these evil moon goddesses that want to destroy everything, would destroy everything rather than lose their power. That's not a good guy. That's not God. That's Lilithian gods or Luciferian gods, or have those dark traits because they were designed to be testers. And as this game evolved from basically a game of cosmic pong, pushing planets and galaxies and stars around, to actually having characters that could feel pain, that could actually feel their emotions. Emotions were always there. Okay, that's the nature of a soul. It has feelings. It has. Even if you're a being of pure thought, you have some thoughts you like better. You grade your thoughts. That's the difference between a program and an AI. An AI has a way of deciding which thoughts are more consistent with its worldview. Now, the worldview can be supplied, is sort of supplied by the programmer of the AI. And this is why there's so much furor over what data set they use to train an AI. Because the more data they feed it, the more likely it is to put that data together in ways that fall outside what they want the AI to think. And if you follow the AI world, you know that that's a huge point of contention right now, and why there's so many people fighting over where AI is headed and worried about, will we lose control of it. At any rate, this final phase of this game that we've been in, called, I like to call it the Messiah plan, the Messiah game, has basically been organized around, okay, God, if this system is so great, this system of karma and reincarnation, you do it. And you prove that it works even for this old God that pissed everybody off, because you were always one step ahead of us. And that's what we've been doing since long before humanity was ever created. Running this engine and gradually, through the process, defining karma better. Okay, the more souls that karma has to judge, the better judge karma will be. Think about it. If you have a judge sitting in a court, they will maybe get their first judgeship in, a district court, circuit court, whatever. They will get certain kinds of cases. They will be assigned maybe family law cases first, and then they will eventually get, if they get promoted to be more challenging cases. And the highest judges in the United States will get to the Supreme Court, where they get the cases that actually touch on whether this law or this case, who is on the constitutionally right side. And so you can see karma as the highest judge in this game, but of course there are other judges, there are other versions of karma that are specialized for other purposes. And so the highest heaven version of the game is different from other games, but this is a model that is active in all other universes. And the most important other universe is Lucifer's universe, because that's where you go to be tested and judged. The Lilithian universes are like the spiritual universes. Some are bad, some are good, some are hells, some are heavens. And some are geared towards training. They will plan new lives and send people out, send souls out to experience incarnations in the physical world, in Lucifer's realm. Others basically just keep their people there doing what they like to do. Artist colonies that focus on different kinds of art or whatever, whatever you could think of as, nudist colony, I don't know, whatever they want to do. Others will run it kind of like a Matrix movie scenario, where the characters that get sucked in there get some holographic experience that stimulates negative emotions, and they milk those negative emotions for spiritual energy, and that's how they get the energy they need to do what they're going to do, whatever their goal is in this multiverse game. So sin emerged more or less in this phase, and the original sin had nothing to do with sex. Sex had not even been invented at this point. At this point, the chosen species were basically the Elohim. These were shape-shifting, powerful, spiritual beings that could, with their mind, do almost anything. And there were lower level ones that had less power that were kind of subordinate to them, lower consciousness. Just like we have in the Catholic Church, you have the idea of archangels having a lot of power, angels having less power, and saints having some power to help their friends, and then spirits who might just be a relative that visits you as a ghost form, or you're able to contact or something like that. This idea is already in Catholicism. It's already in most religions. It's sort of been just played down to support the authority of the secular leadership of the churches, because their idea is basically, I want to keep this power. And it's not necessarily for bad reasons, but those who pursue power generally are Luciferian souls or Lilithian souls. The difference is the Luciferian souls will generally pursue power within the law, and they will want to set the law to maintain their power and be the ones who make the laws and who enforce the laws. The Lilithian souls are the ones who, I don't want to go through all that work, I just want power, so I'm going to go around. I'm going to be the lawbreakers. I'm going to be the ones that try to find the loopholes in the law that will get as far as they can toward breaking it, or even break it if they think they can get away with. They are the criminals, the sinners. Luciferians can and will be sinners, but their sins are sins of domination, power, overstepping their authority. And this is why better governments have to be organized, thinking in minds of how to rein in both the Luciferian and the Lilithian souls. And to do that, you've got to take the God point of view. Yes, there will be all these different character types, all of these different personalities. You cannot come up with an education system that is going to prevent evil, that's going to generate all perfect little children that do everything what they're told. That if you do that, it's only because you have stolen their creativity. You've basically turned them into a hive mind, which is one of the solutions that both of these groups have kind of gravitated to. Now wait a minute, if we could make our own non-player character library, we could just basically keep recycling these characters and keep our power going forever, and we would never have any real competition except from each other. And if you look at the rule of the world down through the ages, it's been basically these Luciferian and Lilithian bloodlines sort of managing power by dividing it in kind of a mafia family method. The criminal mafia are the Lilithian families, so like they tend to be the newer wealth, the wealth that's willing to take more risk because they're less secure in what they're doing. Their power is not rooted maybe in land ownership or sovereignty, but in what I can grab and defend with my gang, my Goon squad, which again is where I got the idea of sin going from mother god, moon goddesses to Goon squads. It's to a Goon squad point now, because nobody really in this postmodern era, nobody in the realms of power thinks of religion as anything more than a tool. I don't care which country you look at, countries that say they're Muslim. Iran, the theocracy of the Ayatollahs, is not a Muslim country. It is dominated by anti-Muslim leadership who do not have any respect for Allah. They want power, they want domination, and they want to dominate through enforcement of the most draconian forms of Sharia law and the powers of other areas of the Islamic world. The Saudi Arabian government is the same way. They call themselves Muslims, but they are basically just powers. Luciferian powers that are all about maintaining their position, maintaining their mafia's position on the board. And many of these have both Luciferian and Lilithian components. So, the Luciferian component of Iran, say, is the formal government of the Ayatollahs, and the Lilithian element is the terrorist organizations that they back, like Hamas, like Hezbollah. Okay, in other countries, the Luciferian element, like for instance in the US, is the deep state. They will have more of a Lilithian element in these three-letter agencies that operate in the darkness. CIA, the FBI, who basically do what they want and have cooked up the system so they really aren't accountable to Congress like they should be. The last time any real accountability to Congress was exerted was back during the Church Commission, when all this nonsense came out about what the CIA was doing, basically making extra money through drug trade so that they could fund their black ops, so they wouldn't have to go to Congress to get more money. Well, nowadays they just make one of these big omnibus spending bills, put $4 trillion in it and 4,000 pages, send it to Congress and say, put a gun to their head and say, you better sign or we're going to badmouth you in the media tomorrow and you won't get reelected. So basically, you've got the whole world being run as a mafia empire. Some of it operating more legitly in a Luciferian vein, and some under the radar, a more Lilithian group. And then, the main swing is still the same age-old shifting between, okay, we've let the patriarchy, the God side, Lucifer being the God of the Bible is Lucifer. And the God of the New Testament is mostly Lilithian. Oh, let's love everybody. If you just love everybody, everything will be perfect. Treat everybody wonderful. Be nice. This is a Lilithian God. Doesn't really match the actual Jesus character. When you read the New Testament, Jesus was a badass. He didn't like sinners. He found all the sinners in the temple making big bucks out of offerings on the Sabbath and selling sacrificial animals so people could make blood sacrifices, and he cussed them out. That is very different than most people's idea of God today. I don't care what religion you are, most of them have fallen into this sin of, there's no such thing as evil, there's no bad. Even the Catholic Church still has exorcists, but most of the church kind of looks at the exorcists as, they're crazy guys. No, you really need to go to a psychiatrist. You need to take drugs and blah, blah, blah. And this whole idea of demons is nonsense. That's how most people think. When in fact, there's more demonic possession going on now than ever. In fact, possession actually comes right from your smartphone. There are active agendas to mess up your mind with sin, to make you think something that is horrible is actually great. Now, to give you an example, when I was a child, I was born in 1959, and the vast majority of people would have thought it was absolutely disgusting to even consider anal sex. Somebody's my ear, tell me I'm wrong there. Now it's like, oh, it's the hottest thing. Oh, it's the most sexy thing. Man, you gotta do it. This is what's driving the transsexual thing. This idea that, oh, well, if I want to be a woman, all I gotta do is somehow make an extra vagina out of, kind of like my asshole. This is sick. This is evil. This is sinful. There is nothing good about it. There is nothing empowering or giving freedom or supporting people's rights. This is not a right to be sinful. This is evil. This is sin. And anybody who sat back and thought about it would say, yeah, that's not natural. It messes people's minds. It gets them confused about whether I'm a guy or I'm a gal. It gets them confused about, you know what? Part of being human is reproducing and having children. And that experience is an incredibly important part of growing up, of having a human life. If you miss out on that, you are missing one of the biggest lessons that you get out of being human, getting to be a parent. Why? Because getting to be a parent is the closest you're going to come to getting a chance to be God. To have the same problem as God had of having children that start out with less knowledge, less capability, more susceptibility to sin and temptation than you have. And you have challenged to raise them. You're challenged to raise them in a balanced way, not as an authoritarian telling them what to do, when to do, how to do it, and then the moment that they get away to college, they go, oh God, I'm freed from my parents, now I can go drink every weekend and screw girls every night at the frat house, which was what a lot of the preachers' kids did in my era. Who had a very strict upbringing. They would go to college and they would be the biggest hellions on campus. The ones getting girls pregnant and the ones always in trouble and always at the dean's office and getting expelled. Okay? Parenting is a balancing act. It's not about all love and being your kid's best friends. That will encourage them to become narcissistic. And the more you encourage narcissism, the worst kind of disorders will develop from it. The worst kind of sins a narcissist will rationalize. They will become more Lilithian. If you are very authoritarian, you will become a Luciferian soul as you do your parenting. And so you're doing this balance between you and the kids will be learning from you. And also learning from the role models they have at school. So teachers teaching kids, you've got that balancing act too. And if you've ever been around a school environment, you will know that there's a variety of good and bad teachers. And they can be good in different ways and they can be bad in different ways. The bad teachers are either the very authoritarian ones that will, just run their classroom like a prison. It's also bad the ones that basically, totally lose control of their classroom and they let the lesson go wherever the kids want to take it. Or they will give them some really easy thing to do that's engaging. Let them watch movies every day, for instance. Watch cartoons all day. There's that teaching style too. There's a happy medium where You find a way to engage the children with what you need to teach them, and you maintain discipline that is a best fit for the kids you have, and it will change year to year. Some years you will have like a larger number of your class troublemakers, your jokesters and hellions, and you'll have to run a little bit of more authoritarian classroom that year. Other years you will have a better bunch of kids that listen and maybe just need to be challenged more to think outside the box and not be so agreeable all the time, to actually stand up for themselves more and think more independently. Okay, this is exactly what God was trying to teach his family, what God was trying to do. If your idea of God is as an authoritarian, micromanaging creator and dictator of everything, you are a Luciferian soul. If your idea of God is, oh, God is love, unconditional love, we just need to love everybody, we can love evil into not being evil, or there's no such thing as evil, or they're only evil because we raised them wrong, we just need to raise them better next time, so we'll do better with the next generation, and we'll encourage these evils, we'll love them. This is Lilithian. That's not going to work. That's evil. The woke cult is just as evil as the most authoritarian group on the planet, and one could argue that most authoritarian group, at least at one point, and maybe still is, the leadership of the Catholic Church. It's a very authoritarian, a very Luciferian organization. Not necessarily all bad, but they're very much about authority. Okay? If you don't challenge the church's authority, you'll be excommunicated. You'll be persecuted as a heretic. You'll even be burned at the stake. That has happened, and not so long ago. And there are signs that it's going in that direction again. And this is evidence of the adversary working on that organization right now, from both ends. You've got people at the lower level of the Catholic Church pushing the church in certain directions. You've got people at the top pushing in a certain direction, and they're at cross purposes. And they're both wrong. They're both trying to be a dictator. They're trying to push at the grassroots level. Effectively, you've got media and Catholic celebrities trying to push the Pope to be more woke, to join this, oh, well, all religions are one, we're all one. And we just need to water down our religion till it's just like everything else, and then it'll be fine. You know what this is? This is communist Catholicism. This is what they're trying to do in China. They have a version of the approved religions that they've modified their gospel. They told them what their churches need to look like, and you've got to have the images of Mao and now Xi Jinping up, and you've got to have their version of the Chinese Bible, or you don't get to operate there. This is evil. This is horrible. This is not the good future. This is an adversarial future. Not where we want to go. You've got another group, large group, growing group, actually the largest growing group in the world right now, hates religion. You know what? We need to redefine freedom of religion to be freedom from religion. And the vast majority of people in big cities in the U.S. and most of Europe think that way, especially the city people think that way. They've been programmed to think that way with decades of cult Marxist programming. And if you don't think there's cult Marxism going on in your programming, you're not paying attention to all these Netflix series and movies that you've been watching. That's why I call it nutflux. Your mind is being discombobulated by half-truths or absolute flat-out lies about how things are. This whole idea of social justice is absolute nonsense. Neo-racism that now is teaching white kids that they're somehow evil and they owe restitution to people that whose skin is a little darker than them just because they're white. That is evil. It's worse than anything that went on the other direction. And the same thing with the toxic femininity now. The patriarchy was never as bad as it is now with the toxic feminists wanting to control everything and screaming they're being oppressed anytime any man gets more attention than they do. Look at the clowns on The View. This bunch of women that think they dictate to the world, and they've got a whole following of women and beta men, suck-uppers, listening to them like they're Jesus Almighty. Whoopi Goldberg? She's a friggin' actress. She doesn't know for shit about politics. Or any of these other clowns. Taylor Swift. Are you going to get your advice for politics from somebody like that spends all their time in rehearsals and performing and doing promotional tours and stuff like that and PR stunts so you can look good to the media? They don't have time to think about politics. They don't know what they're talking about. And yet these are the ones dictating to you what you should be thinking every day. And the folks that are in the media organizations, the news organizations, are just as bad. They're just tuned to a different wavelength, but they're the same kind of plastic people that are chosen basically for being part of this insider gang, this hive mind. These are the beautiful people, representatives of the queens, that tell the drones and the worker bees and the soldier ants what to do, who to attack today, who to defend today, when to close your eyes, when to open them, when to leave them half shut. A lot of sin going down, but you needn't worry. This is all part of a plan. A lot of people are thinking, you know what, this must be the apocalypse, and they're right. But it's not the apocalypse of the Bible. That's old prophecy. If you actually look at the prophecies in the Bible closely, you will see that they are all based upon things that already happened back in ancient times. Or they're pie-in-the-sky visions of, God, wouldn't it be great if it came out like this? There are little pieces of revelation within those, because that's how God effectively works. That's how the better gods, those that respect God and karma, work through inspiration, through ideas. And they don't push, they offer. And then it's up to you to interpret what that means to you, and then that creates a plan, a version of the plan that is yours, not something forced on you. And this was this transition that had to happen. At one point, probably God was more of an authoritarian. Had gotten used to, well, the plan's always going to go my way because it was all tested in my mind first. And, that would probably lead to, like the saying goes, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if there's one lesson that God's learned in all this, you gotta want to go back there. In fact, now it's all about getting power back from these other most powerful entities who have been playing this game more consciously than God, and banishing them to their own universe until they have earned the right to get back to the highest heaven. And let's just wind up talking about that, because I think that's a good place to end up. So there's a longer segment on it that I did a while back, but let's just talk about where it's all going. Okay, these 5 fundamental characters in creation will always be operating. This is an engine. Creation will never stop. It will never be done. It will never be perfect. If you think it will ever be perfect, you just really haven't thought it out very well. Because if everything was perfect, everybody would be bored to death. There would be nothing to do. Nothing to invent. Nothing to accomplish. Nothing to experience that hadn't been experienced a bazillion times before. There are some souls that don't mind doing that. You know, the ones that live in, you know, these little huts out here and just want to have their happy little life and go out and cut some wood and go hunt for some food and just live in their little log cabin in the woods. Well, okay, that's something you can do, but that's not what you do if you're going to be growing and learning to be a God. So let's just review how this eternal city of God works. Who's here? Senior creators. This is the highest heaven. This isn't for everybody. This is where the senior creators, the gods, come to basically be in contact with each other and to raise their children. And this is one of the big differences versus how heaven was organized before. In the old days, with the old gods, they could basically just, with a thought, create another entity. That's how Lucifer was created. That's how all the first versions of these other key characters were created. To review, and this also is something you need to remember, this is where the Catholic crossing oneself came from. This is what it really means. Starting at the top, that's not God, that's sin. That's where we start, from a place of sin. We go to the next stop. This place is the place of Lucifer. This is the next stop. It's a consciousness of sin. It's a saying, you know what? I might have to commit sin sometimes to do the right thing for my community, but I'm making a more conscious decision than I was here. It's almost the opposite you would think of. You know, this is my mind. This is where I decide. Your mind is programmed. To control your mind, you have to use your soul. Okay, so Lilith to Lucifer to God. God is the base, the root of, okay, you know what? You've got sin pulling at you, you've got law pulling at you, you've got to make some kind of a balance. You've got to have some kind of a government. This is the foundation of all healthy communities, is a better government. This is what God has been trying to do since before the beginning. This is why creation happened, is to find a way to train and govern souls. This is the whole purpose of the highest heaven, to be the best training and education and government environment there is, so that the children born here will be the leaders and the examples for others to follow as they move to other universes. And eventually, through these examples, through saying, oh, okay, gosh, if I'm godly in the way I do things and patient, then I will actually end up in a better place. after many incarnations of seeing things from different points of view. So, from sin to conscious sin, let's put it that way with Lucifer's viewpoint, to organization, a law and order, and an idea of training new souls, new children, to be less sinful adults, more responsible adults. Then you've got the organization and training. Well, some souls are just fine with following the rules. Those are going to be your worker bees. Those are going to be the ones that just want to do their jobs. They just want to get paid. They just want to be able to buy whatever they want to buy at the store and have enough money for that. That's fine. The multiverse needs a lot of souls like that. They're not the ones that are going to be driving creation. They're non-player characters. They're window dressing. The Borg souls in the highest heaven are the shrubs. It's nice to have, it's attractive. You might want to have your house in heaven look a little different than somebody else's. If it's too fancy or too different, you might get a weird look from your neighbors, like, oh, they're showing off. They're basically demonstrating kind of a Lilithian, narcissistic character. And if you did that enough in the highest heaven, well, you might get shut off. If you started creating discord in this community, you would find that the door from your house would not open anymore. You would not be there if somebody came to visit you. That's essentially how we manage immigration in universes, in the heavens. You don't want somebody in your heaven? You don't punish them, you just lock their so they can say, I want to let back in, Mr. Wizard. I'm sorry, I'll do better this time. And that gateway essentially is karma. Every soul has a karmic signature, and when you get to the God level, you can detect this. And you can detect your own. And you can see, okay, I can feel the forces between me and other souls around me. I can feel if they're positive, negative, if they have no particular feeling. I can sometimes modify them. If I have that kind of a power, I can change negativity into positivity. And I think you all know, you've been around people who can just come into the room and suddenly they just light it up. Some boring party that everybody was like, God, I don't want to be the first to leave, but this is no fun at all. And some lights up and everybody's having a good time. I'm sure everybody has experienced that. Or experienced that, maybe in a movie or in a stage performance where a character will come on stage and it's like, wow. And you just can't take your eye off them. They just light up that whole thing and make this experience magical. Or maybe it's not the character, maybe it's the script, or maybe it's the cinematography. Any piece of that artistry can have that effect. This is a spiritual effect. This is spiritual power. This is how spiritual power works now, after we've gone through this process of developing everything. Okay? Because virtue would have no meaning if we didn't know what sin was. Let's finish the cross. Stations of the cross, up, down, across. The highest, actually, is karma. The souls that matter the most are karma. These are the ones that manage the boundaries. Every soul has within them these 5 elements, these 5 essences of their character. Let's review the Merkaba so I can show you that. The Merkaba is a 12-layer, essentially, universe. Its own black hole, it holds its own Dyson sphere. The first floor layers are personal experience, your own universe experience, which you may not know you have until you get to a God level of consciousness. The next 4 layers in the universes of other gods. The outermost layers are physical experience in Lucifer's testing universe. That's the special place where we have to deal with all the laws of physics and chemistry, where we get hungry, where we can get killed, where all sorts of things are going to challenge us. Okay? We experience that so we will learn, and then we will get to go to better heavens. And as we go to better heavens, we may find that we're developing our own idea of heaven and our own following of people. You know what? I like the God that we've been going to, or the goddess we've been going to, but you know, you've got some pretty good ideas, and you know, we've kind of got a little splitter group here, and I think advance to the God level and have your own universe. Take some of your followers with you. Now, the universe you may have been experiencing may not like that. They may not be happy with you changing from being some kind of a Christian to some kind of a Muslim. And there may be some angst and some unhappiness over that, a struggle. You may create some enemies that are going to try to hold you back. Just like everyone tried to hold God back when God was waking up. They didn't really, you know what? I don't know if we want to let God be successful waking up, because he might still be the same authoritarian jerk. And say, no, wiping my mind. And that is a fear that souls have of being eliminated, especially since they know they can self-eliminate by choosing to re-assimilate with the Borg hive mind, the source. And boy, there's a lot of folks out there right now telling you, oh, we need to become one with everything. We need to return to the source. They're not your friends. They're telling you to basically commit spiritual suicide. Now, that may be something you want to do if you don't like your individual self, you don't like your soul, but it's not a choice I would recommend making. Everybody has with the inside. It's learning how to not let those dominate you and let your godly and karmic nature take over, and decide what you can't know everything. You can't be everything. This idea that I can have it all that is being sold to young girls is nonsense. You cannot have it all. You have to focus on what you want out of life. And you're going to have to give up some things to have that. You're not going to be a good mother if you're completely focused on your career and delegate the raising of your children to the smartphone or some woke teacher in the public school system. It's not going to happen. Generations, you know, a little jerk grandchild or great-grandchild is a big jerk, and we got a lot of big jerks among the youngest generation, especially in the U.S., maybe also in parts of Europe. that have been through this so quickly. It's actually even worse in China because they've basically been going through the same transition, if you will, much more quickly than it affected the West. So at any rate, you know, this idea of some things you have to run on autopilot. If you're not real engaged in politics, you don't want to follow everything, you don't want to get informed about the issues, really informed, and not just listen to, you know, not just go to your come to an end. Or I'm going to vote this way because they're gonna force us all to get abortions, or I'm going to vote this way because they're going to prevent anybody from getting an abortion. This is nonsense. They are messing with your mind. If you want to engage in politics that way, you are engaging with politics as a non-player character. You're letting other people program you, and you should just tune out of that. I'm dead serious. If that is your level of involvement in politics, don't vote. Take your mail-in ballot and just rip it up so nobody else votes for you. And then double check to make sure that you didn't show up on the voting rolls as having voted, because that happens. If you do not have the life, following sports, following the latest pop celebrities, blah, 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 knock yourself out. Just don't think that you can compete, that you can participate consciously in other dimensions of thought. Okay? You're not going to learn how to be a master theologian by watching some show about, you know, it's about reincarnation, or about, you know, watching The Matrix. Oh, I suddenly know everything about how the world works because I watched The Matrix. God, that's so stupid. Don't fall in that trap. If you don't have the time to invest to people, I'll post something and they will just immediately attack as if they know better, or as if, well, yeah, you think you know. Look, if you don't think I've done my research, if you don't think I have thought deeply about everything I present on this channel, you know nothing about this channel. There's over 200 episodes here from the last 3 years. I have been working deeply on this, and that's why I have so much conviction. It's not a sense of superiority. It's a sense of, you know what, it all makes sense to me. I have not found a single data point that does not make sense within what I'm telling you. And other religions, in other groups, in political parties, everywhere, idealism is stupid. It's not an ideal. You've got to look at all sides. You've got to look at all perspectives. That's why we reincarnate. You cannot learn everything in one lifetime. You cannot learn everything in 1,000,000 lifetimes. Even God didn't learn everything. I had to specialize. The specialties changed over time, as was necessary for the times, because God's incarnations were these special ones where, you know, you basically got to the point where the dial between virtue and sin was going over to the sin part. That's when the Messiah comes. That's why we have the story of the apocalypse, of having everything get so bad and having this massive war, and then that's when the Messiah comes. This is a truth of the pattern. But the pattern is not about, doesn't have to be about Jerusalem. Doesn't have to be about the Middle East. That is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that was planted by the adversary. The latest versions of books and documents and Jewish and Muslim are not the original teachings of their prophets, or incorporated the best teachings of subsequent prophets. They were either the wishful thinking of authoritarians, Luciferian souls who wanted to maintain power, or the wishful thinkings of Lilithian souls who wanted to steal power. And this is the essence of Marxism. Especially cultural Marxism is all about creating oppressor-oppress scenarios so that you can attack the people that have power, and the people that have power can attack the people that don't. And what happens? Well, the adversary get rid of the chosen species before they produce a Messiah, before they produce a successful new version of time-space, a new version of the simulation multiverse, a new version of the game that's more fun than it was before. Especially the Lilithians are bad because they like the way things used to be. It was easier to play the game when they had just unlimited spiritual power and they could do anything, make anything happen. That's the ultimate narcissistic fantasy, right? And this is how they play to the narcissism of young and naive souls. And this is why the Lilithian element is worse than the Luciferian element. And that's essentially this exclusive level where they not only have all the power, but they have license to commit all the sins. That's as bad as it gets. And that's essentially the state we've got to now when we're ready for a Messiah. But you have to balance these things. You have to have government. I'm sorry, libertarians. I'm sorry, anarchists. Your ideas are nonsense. They're idealistic nonsense. They might work if the human population was reduced to, I don't know, the globalists want it to be 500 million. I think that's still too many people to have a libertarian paradise. Things they do, and if you let people just run wild, those who have the most power will oppress the ones who don't have power. I don't care how noble their purpose is, how libertarian they are, they will step on others. I mean, you only have to look at typical battles between neighbors. I've lived in a lot of neighborhoods, and even the nicest people will have disputes. We want to cut down this tree. Oh, but half of it's on my lot, and I like that tree. There have been people, neighbors, that have gone to blows, have started feuds over a tree, over a pet that got run over in the other family's yard or something like that. You cannot run a country, you cannot run a world without laws, without a government. At the same time, you have to make sure that that government is not too top-heavy, because power corrupts. You've got to make sure that that government is open and transparent. Absolutely. You cannot deal without those things. And the government that the globalists and their communist allies in China want to give you is the opposite of that. It is not transparent at all. It is totally run for, by, and completely with the intent of perpetuating the ones at the top. It's run basically like a mafia organization, a bunch of godfathers all take over is the smothering mother, the one that has all the goods on everybody else, so nobody would dream of attacking Mother Godfather, because she knows everything. She knows where all the bodies are buried. And that's the real evils in our society, are the ones that have this deeper knowledge that they can use to manipulate and control other people. This is why we're not getting disclosure about UAPs, about aliens, about contact with other worlds, other dimensions. They're suppressing it. Why? Because they don't want you. I don't know if they could handle it. We might lose our power. They might go haywire. That's one argument. Then there's the Lilithians, who maybe have allies within these other powers and are hoping to be playing on the side that is going to destroy the chosen species or turn it into a slave species like it used to be and get to be one of the slave masters. Yes, there are people and non-people playing those games. They're not good. They're not the good guys. That doesn't mean you have to be totally afraid and throw in the towel. We can and are defeating them. But it takes an effort from all of us. There's no Archangel Michael, right? The point of where we're at in creation is distribution of power, giving every soul the opportunity to rise to the level that they're capable of. You can't do that if Almighty God is going to come to save the day, if Jesus is going to come riding in and force everybody to do everything right. If you've got that in your mind, you are part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. If you've got in your mind that you are the chosen people, I have the chosen religion, I'm going to be the one that survives the apocalypse, you're going about this all the wrong way, and you're involved in this special time. Now that is your choice. You can do that. I'm not recommending it. I don't want to see this species go out of existence. I like humanity. In fact, that's the way heaven's going to be forevermore, because it's the center of time. The center of a time without beginning or end, with no extent. It's the be-all, end-all of the universe. There will be more universes appear to suit new afterlife demand for particular afterlife experiences. There will be people experiencing new futures and new pasts in Lucifer's universe. Not all the incarnations have to be within this special time, although this will be where you have to go if you want to new messianic periods in the future or past. That, you know what, we've got some new thing we want to do with 5,000 years ago. If we can play it and we can get it passed, then we can change that piece of the past. It's going to be easier to make changes to the future. So most people are going to be playing games in the future. And especially for those who are low level, they tend to be more comfortable having lives that are sequential, having incarnations that kind of follow, okay, I see how this went historically, how it fits. Then they get back to heaven and they have their life integration, life review, and it makes more sense to them if they can see a chronology in it. Most of his time out exploring with groups of his favorites, looking at, okay, what's going on in the past, what's going on in the future, what are we interested in, what are other souls up in heaven and other gods saying, you know, you should take a look at this. I'd really like to see if I could talk you into going on an expedition to see what really happened 350,000 years ago. Because we have a general idea based upon the previous version of space-time, but nobody really knows how it came out because we only know what the test version was like in the mind of God. And the actual version came out of the implementation and testing in Lucifer's universe. And nobody in there knows exactly how it all came out because they were all incarnated. This is how the game works. There's going to be fun places to play in the future, fun places to play in the past. People more interested in the future, people more interested in the past, people interested in the now. And it's all good. It's all something you can focus on. There's something in the game for everybody now. And even those who don't like playing games can just be a non-player character and just bop around experiencing this or that till they find something that engages them enough to do something with that incarnation other than just follow their programming. And then they'll launch into their own path and have their own passions and their own path towards godhood. Easy peasy. And it's only damaging to the extent that you let it damage you. You let it become a crutch, if you will. And if you've been around somebody who's experienced, who's been through a lot of pain and suffering, there are basically two kinds of people you'll run into. There are the ones who have mastered it and who have grown into a better person because of the pain and suffering, who have achieved more, who were able to give more as a result of that. And there are others who have become very codependent and needy and whiny and demanding and want to be entitled to everybody feeling sorry for them. Okay? I'm sure you've encountered both kinds of people. And I'm pretty sure most of you would agree that those are the kinds the ones that are all whiny and demanding and clingy, they're going to be in the hells that are gradually going to have fewer and fewer conscious attendees. You don't want to be there. You don't want to be with a god or a goddess that demands absolute servitude, that demands devotion every day, praying 5 times a day with exactly this particular ritual. I don't know, maybe some people like that. I don't know, there's a lot of Muslims who like to pray like that. Frankly, I'm not too impressed with it. I don't like the idea of getting up at 4 a.m. to do your first prayer. I don't like the idea of having to pray preference, their way of communing with God.
If they aren't, if you're going to force them to commune your way, you are a tyrant. You are a Luciferian soul or organization. If you are on the other side of saying, well, they can do whatever they want, and teach their kids whatever they want, and they don't have to conform to anything in our society because they're free. You're a Lilithian soul. You believe in a Lilithian, anarchistic, communistic way of running things. This is not going to work either. This is going to be breeding and tender age. This is another form of evil. Evil will be punished, whether it's Lilithian or Luciferian evil. That's what karma's job is, and the punishment is being banished. The worst banishment you can get is basically losing your identity. This is being assimilated with the source, becoming one with not everything, but all the NPC characters, just one of the stock characters in the Akashic records. That's not a reward, folks. Oneness, cosmic oneness cultists. You want to go explore the Akashic records, you're saying that you want to be a Me Too soul. That you want to just go like lipstick on a pig. Oh, see, I'm enlightened now. That's not the way it works. I'm sorry. If you've been told that, if you believe that, you've been lied to. And it's still your choice. If you like living a lie, if you like living in a fantasy world, knock yourself out. But don't claim that you are enlightened. You are eyes wide shut. If you think there is like an on-off switch to, okay, wow, I'm a spiritual person now, I have arrived. That's nonsense. You're not going to get enlightened by one psychedelic trip, or not by doing psychedelics every and it is dangerous bullshit. Because every time you open up this pineal portal to the spiritual world, you don't know what you're going to get. This is the Pandora's box. Okay? Yes, it is our interface to the spiritual realms, the spiritual universes. And most of the time, it connects you to, entities like the machine elves, which are just kind of mischievous and like to have fun with you, but they're generally not evil. But it can just as easily connect you to one of these very dark Lilithian or Luciferian universes that's going to want to use you as part of their army. The Lilithians like hive mind armies, the Luciferians like armies. Sex first. Get you in compromising pictures that you don't want shown to your family and friends. Then they'll pull you into the next layer of these parties where people are doing, really bad things in groups. And the next layer is getting pulled into the parties where they're drinking blood and eating cakes that look like human bodies and stuff like that. And before you know it, you're participating in satanic and tantric rituals, which are really evil. Sex magic, death magic is not good. It's cheating, if you will, spiritual cheating. Yes, there are times where you might do that. You might choose to do that. Are basically driven by the idea that the end justifies the means. Okay, you'll know something about yourself. You'll know something about where you fit in. And if you have a high sense of responsibility, you know you're doing something wrong, but you're doing it because it seems like it's got to be done. This is basically how we go to war and we kill people at war, because they believe that the other side is actually evil. And yes, if we have another war, there will be a side of evil. There will be evil on both sides, so it'll be more like a lesser evil. But believe me, if China becomes the next world power, we are in big, big trouble. Better. Russia needs to fall apart. As it's currently constructed, it is an oligarchy, a blatant, brazen oligarchy run by a dictator. Basically a mafia lord of mafia lords, godfather of godfathers. That's Russia. It's not a healthy government. And we've got too many people in the rest of the world looking at Russia and looking at China and saying, wow, if we could just be like that, we'd be so much more successful. And it's really sick to look at the political spectrum in the US right now and see the right thinking, oh man, if we only had a Putin, maybe Trump could be another Putin. Looking at China and saying, oh, we need a communist party to tell everybody what's good for everybody and make sure nobody has too much, nobody uses more than their fair share of carbon, and nobody has any meat because cow farts are bad. These people are insane on both sides. And there's just not enough people in the center that even give a damn to not just listen to the bullshit going back and forth. I'm like, oh, I don't know what to believe today. I guess I'll vote for Biden. It's a sad state of affairs, but we're nearly through this, and it's going to be a very interesting year. At any rate, don't sin. But if you do, sin. For instance, if you're going to be promiscuous, don't get married. Tell your partners up front, I'm not the faithful kind. If that limits your access to partners, well, that's a choice you made. If you're going to get into a permanent relationship, a serious relationship, a committed relationship, don't cheat. Well, if you're not getting enough sex, use porn. Masturbate. There's no sin in that. Anybody that's telling you it's sinful to masturbate is evil. Anybody that's telling you, oh, you've got to keep your essence in. This is tantric magic. This is sex magic. Sex magic is using the sexual force to if you're in control of a situation, it's not good. If you're using it to heal somebody, well, okay, maybe, but you have to understand that that creates a karmic link. That creates a dependency. And many of the healers in our society are not actually helping people fix their problems, because their problems are spiritual and they're putting band-aids on, either physically or spiritually, to problems that basically just create a dependency with this one healer, this one God. And this is what's so sick about psychological therapy. You've got a bunch of who get and tells them everything's all right, you're doing good. All of these postmodernist nonsense messages that you're supposed to be nice and make them feel good. This is not helpful. This is creating codependencies. This is encouraging narcissism. This is encouraging sin. You are doing evil, people like that, and you know who you are. And most of you know you are doing evil, and that makes you angry. I've seen it. I've seen so much repressed anger and unhappiness in the people that are serving in medical or especially mental health. I can think of that weren't like that. There were generally younger people who had a more religious idea of what they were doing, more of a mission idea than just implementing what they learned in college. Most of college these days is driven by Marxist indoctrination. The idea that, okay, if we just look at any problem scientifically, there's one solution and we just need to apply that like a cookie cutter to everything. This is how Marxists think. It's stupid. It's rooted in this dumb idea that one size fits all. We're all one. We are not all one. We are all individuals. Something we want. We don't want to be told the truth, so we can go out and be one every day and say just the right things and do just the right things, so we will get our daily ration of air and water and food. That's the future that these guys want to bring, and it is very dark. Let's not do that. Let's not go there. May not matter so much for you if you're older like me, but for your kids, kids, let's not go there. That doesn't mean we need to go pull out our pitchforks and start poking everybody we think is a tyrant. It means that we need to do what we can to stand up for what is not tyranny. It's not easy to define exactly what good is, but most of us, unless we're pretty evil on your smartphone, don't watch it. Don't encourage them to make more evil. And luckily that's starting to happen. A lot of these woke cult movies, a lot of these, there's, the new saying is get woke, go broke. People are saying, I'm not going to watch that anymore. I don't want to see a remake of Snow White that is just laughably woke, that is preaching politics. I don't want to see a version of, his history that is completely warped around to sell some globalist communist agenda. Nonsense lie. People are waking up to that. They're finally listening to real scientists that are saying, no, of the solution. Evolution without intelligent design. The more they look at it, the less it looks like they're ever going to make life in a lab. So stop pretending that's the solution to everything. It's not. This whole nonsense about, well, this is how civilization emerged because there was no writing before 3000 BC, therefore there could have been no civilization before then. And, well, I don't know what was going on at Göbekli Tepe, but it was just, like a cult center for hunter-gatherers, and they would gather together. And, wow, I don't know why they put up all these big stones, and I don't know where all these megalithic monuments came from else. Destructive cult. They are a communist cult that have this idea of the way things should be. And the part of that they are unwilling to let go of is this absolute bullshit nonsense out of Africa. Nonsense. Humanity did not develop from monkeys in Africa. End of story. Modern humans did not come from Africa. That was one of the places where most of the DNA was preserved after a great reset. That's why so much DNA traces back to Africa or to Central Asia. But in fact, it doesn't answer all the problems. And there are other sources that are being discovered that happen to not survive as well in most places because of how it hit. And if you look at the latest research on the Dryas period, you will know that there was a period about 12 to 13,000 years ago where there were a bunch of cataclysms. Some people are arguing it was an asteroid or an airburst of a meteorite, kind of like the Tunguska event. Some are arguing that it was massive solar events, and all of those things are being talked about today again as, wow, we're about due for another of these. Or volcanic events. Mega volcanoes go off occasionally, and some of the bigger ones like Yellowstone, when of stuff that gets spouted into the atmosphere causes basically what would happen if we had, a massive nuclear exchange. It causes a nuclear winter. An ash winter of years where nothing's going to grow, and the rain is going to be coming down with lots of chemicals, especially sulfur, that's not good for plants, and it will kill off most of life on the planet if we're not prepared. And that's why we need to prepare for those things to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you want our species to survive, we have to get off this planet. We have to so monumentally stupid, especially after what we've seen of globalism 1.0, where it was so brittle that one event, this pandemic, that wasn't even a real pandemic. I mean, it was that COVID, the original version, was mild compared to the Spanish flu when it first hit 100 years before. And yet we shut down the whole planet, we screwed up the whole supply chain, and we're still suffering the repercussions of that today. And it could well be that whole countries, whole populations are going to be decimated. I expect that's going to happen in China. I expect it's already been happening, and they've been covering and have been watching the activity of crematoriums and the businesses that serve folks that are, giving their loved ones a burial or cremation or service of whatever. There are estimates that as many as 500 million Chinese have died in the last 5 years. 500 million. In fact, many people believe that, contrary to their claim of having 1.4 billion people, they have less than a billion now. And by every account, unlike what these globalist assholes are telling you about, oh, we're over. The human population is decreasing quickly. Now it's going to keep growing for a while simply because of, it's got a hysteresis effect. So, but if you look at the birth rates and the death rates, we're on a decline. We are on a cataclysmic decline now. And there seems to be no end in sight. And it's only being fed by these woke cult numbskulls who want to kill all the cows because they fart, who want to stop us from having any gas vehicles, even though those are the most efficient. We have, contrary to what many people are saying, been finding more and more sources of hydrocarbons, more and more to go to this green making all these lithium batteries. You go outside the big cities there to the places where they're doing all this mining and manufacturing, and it's like going to the pits of hell. I've been there. And that was even 20 years ago. I can only imagine how much worse it is now. And no, they haven't been cleaning it up. They haven't been reducing their carbon footprint. They've been building more coal-fired power plants than ever before in China, especially since so many of their dams degrees of weather. They are in a world of hurt, and their hurt is going to spill over to the rest of the world, and they've been hiding it behind their great firewall. They've been telling you through their agents in Western media how great it is, how perfect everything is in China, and selling it with a bunch of numbskulls that they pay to make content on YouTube and gets featured by Google, who has some kind of a nasty relationship, kind of like the Kissinger-Mao relationship with CCP China. These are evil folks, and we need to take them down. We need to expose what they're doing. If you work for one of these companies and you're seeing this kind of stuff going down, if you aren't blowing the whistle, even at the risk of your job, even at the risk of martyrdom, that's going to be warning you, you don't have much time left. You got to do something. Blow the whistle. You've got a perfect place to do that with OMG's James O'Keefe. Contact them anonymously. Work through VPNs and hide yourself and find a way to get somebody from that organization to where you're going to be sitting when you're talking to somebody and they're telling you about some internal information that is pretty damning. And they'll just have a microphone ready and they will catch it and they will expose. No bad shit is going down. Even if you think it's going to benefit your side, even if you're, well, I'm trans or I'm gay and I gotta be on their side. I'm a woman, I gotta support everybody, I've gotta be nice. That's not going to wash it with karma. And no, I am not a bigot. I am not a racist. I am not a Trumpy. I'm not a MAGA person. I'm telling you the truth. You don't have much time to get on the right side of God and karma. Do it. Well, for the Honest Hour, I hope you enjoyed that one. Like, share, subscribe. Sorry it went so long.